Let's start on the end. And why don't you introduce yourself and then tell us a little bit about your family and what brings you on our panel today.
Hello, everybody. My name is Yvonne Borquist. I am a member here at BPC, and I am a mom to our 30-year-old son, our only child. He has special needs. He's on the autism spectrum, cognitively delayed. He has bipolar disorder. And he recently moved into a group home last year. But before that, there were many, many years where my husband and I thought, what is the future going to look like? And we've had a lot of ups and downs and in between. And now, though, looking back, I can say that with each experience that we had, it has really brought us closer to God and just meeting people, meeting people along our road. So that's my story. I've got a lot more, but that's kind of the gist of it all.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I'm John Falgeller. I'm the token dad here tonight, at least on the panel. I am a special needs dad to my wonderful son, Christopher, who is 14. He'll be graduating 8th grade next month. But more specifically, not only am I a dad who gives back in a variety of ways in terms of working with ministries around the country, I feel I have a very interesting and unique perspective on being a special needs dad, because not only of the experiences I've had raising my own son and the ways I've given back, but I'm also now a divorced dad. And the thing that I really want to highlight here are, really the needs for having the supports in your families and in your marriages, because the divorce rate is already high. It's exponentially higher in a special needs family. And I think, just based on kind of the tone of our conversation tonight, it's really imperative for all of us to be not just honoring our commitment as parents, but also honoring our commitments in our marriages and supporting our spouses and supporting those in our home who are helping to take care of our kids.
Okay, I think we're at Ellen now.
Hi, my name is Ellen Gardner, and I'm a wife to an amazing man named Mitch and a mom to 5 kids. My firstborn lives with autism and profound autism and bipolar disorder. And he moved into a group home a few years ago, and he's with us a lot at home on the weekends and on Wednesdays. But he's an amazing kid, and I am definitely better for having him. And I agree with being closer to God and seeing the world differently. And he's just, I love him so much. I see him as Davis, and he also has a disability. But that's why I'm here.
Thank you. I want to kind of build off some of what we saw in our preview of the documentary. One of the things I don't think we saw yet was a discussion about how your child's disability impacts your marriage relationship. And I know you brought that up. Let's start with Yvonne on the end. How has that over the years, how has your son's disability impacted your marriage?
Well, considering I think the divorce rate for special needs families, I think it's 80 or 85%. My husband and I will be celebrating our 34th wedding anniversary May 7, and I think that is just a testimony to the fact that we have dedicated our life to our son and to our family unit of 3, despite all of the storms that we encountered along the way. And I think that what helped have us be really tight as a husband and a wife is that we made the commitment, not just when we got married, but when we had our son Ryan, we made that commitment to stay true to everything that happened. And when we got the diagnosis when he was almost 4 years old, we knew that it was going to be a journey. We knew that it was going to be a lot of storms. And we just looked at each other and said, I've got your back. And that's what we continue to do. And I'm just so blessed to say that my husband and I have remained very close. And if not, we have become even closer as the years continue to go on. So blessed to say that.
John, how much of your story would you like to share on that?
Sure. So what I would tell you is that my ex-wife and I were married for 15 years. Our son obviously is 14. And, we had the experience of when our son was born, it really threw us for a loop, as it does for most families. We thought we were doing marriage well. We thought we had all the answers. And when you throw a special needs child into the mix, that just throws everything upside down. And what we learned was we really had to do life differently because it wasn't what we expected. But what was really a specific and interesting challenge for us was that we were not people of faith. We weren't Christian. We didn't have a church community. And we had some friends, but no special needs friends. We had some help from family, but we don't have a big family. As I like to famously say, I'm an only child. So was my ex-wife, and so was my son. So there's no uncles and aunties. There's no typical siblings that are going to grow up to kind of help them out. And so we went through a season about 10 years ago where the storms became that difficult. And just so that everyone's aware, my child has autism and is also nonverbal. So as much, as we tried to pour into him, it still put a strain on the marriage. It was really church and coming to Christ that saved us. It was getting into good Christian counseling that saved our marriage years ago. But even with all of those supports, even with the church community, even with everything that we poured ourselves into, I'm still sitting here as a product of divorce. And I'd like to say that, it's not my fault, because that's not fair, because, it's, both people come to a place and a decision. And as much as I wanted to save the marriage, again, here I am. So the thing that I would impress upon everybody here is that as a father, it's important for both parties to step up in the marriage, both parties to step up in caregiving, but also be aware of the differences in terms of the dynamics with, men and women, with husbands and wives. What are your gifts? What are your talents? What do you do well in the marriage, and how can you support the family? Because I think too often it's a conversation about, as in our family in the beginning, mom is, the autism mama bear. Mom's going to do everything. Mom's going to handle it all. And I'm just going to step out of the way because I don't want to step on her toes. But then that sets up a really negative and just hurtful dynamic in the marriage. So it's important that each individual understands their role, that you communicate well, and that you support each other. I know that, I'm a better person now because of what I've learned, but I also know that, my ex-wife is still a great mom and I'm still a great dad. But again, when you think you have it all figured out, you don't. So that's the most important thing to remember, I think, there.
And Jess, you talked a lot about in the film about high levels of stress and anxiety you're both carrying. How has that impacted your marriage relationship?
Well, Ryan and I just celebrated our 11th year of marriage, and statistically speaking, that's quite the feat, really, seeing that it's a second marriage and we have 8 grieving children and a child with profound special needs. But when we came at it from a little bit of a different perspective, I think, because when you love and lose somebody, you do enter that second relationship, I think, very, very intentionally, in terms of the spousal relationship, so much more so than we did in the first marriages even. And so we entered the marriage with 7 grieving children and Lucas. And from the get-go, we were extremely intentional about date nights, about pursuing respite like our life depended on it, because we didn't know each other that well, and we had to somehow date and get to know each other and cultivate that relationship. And then I would just say, from a woman's perspective, from a wife's perspective, a mother's perspective, I think it's really easy for moms to get really wrapped up in this martyr mommy mentality, and to devote every ounce of energy you have to this child, this miracle baby. In my circumstances, he lived. So, and then to remove that a little bit and say the spousal relationship is just as important, and I have to be just as intentional, and maybe even a little bit more so, because I do believe the best gift we can give our children is that of a healthy, thriving marriage. And it takes a lot of work and a lot of planning, for sure. But even today, like every week, we go on a date night. it's frantic. It's like feed Luke, bathe Luke. Okay, run out to the restaurant, sit down for 2 hours, quick get back home so we can put Luke to bed. But we do it and we sit there and we connect. And I think it's just really boils down to being really intentional.
Would you like to share as well on that one? You don't need to.
And I mean, you guys touched on almost everything. I think it's important to give your spouse space to grow. Earlier in Davis's life, I kind of handled everything. Sometimes I probably kept a list of all the things I did and all the things he didn't, as he was kind of on the provider side and I was more on the nurturing side. And then when things flipped, when hormones entered the situation, and Davis grew past 6 feet, past 6'2", past 6'3", and his behaviors were very aggressive and self-injurious. And Mitch, my husband, had to really step in, and now he's kind of primary, not kind of, he's very primary to keep things safe. It was a lot of growing for him as the roles reversed and changed. And we have, I feel like, almost fallen in love with each other that much more with that space and getting to know each other in new roles in that area with Davis. But yeah, releasing, not keeping the list of look at all that I do. You have no idea how much I do day in and day out, and just know that that they need space and their perspective is just different. But yeah, everybody covered everything else.
Thank you. Let's go to Yvonne on this one. You mentioned you recently, I think a year ago, dropped off your son at a group home. What was the hardest part about that for you?
Letting go. I mean, and that sounds so broad, but letting go in many aspects. And last fall, I participated in a webinar for Key Ministry. And if you have never seen the webinars for Key Ministry, I recommend that you go to YouTube and look all the amazing webinars they have. But this particular one that I participated in was an hour of just explaining the experience of from the beginning of when we knew we were going to be placing Ryan, which was years ago, just planning for the future, all the steps we took that brought us to that ultimate moment of driving Ryan to his group home and saying, you know, you're going to be living here now. And he lives in a beautiful group home in Olmsted Falls. For those who are not familiar with the area, it's only about 20 minutes away from where we live in Westlake. But still, it felt like really far away, as though I was taking him to the other side of the world. But real quick, I want to just share an experience that we had where I truly had to let go. Ryan has to have blood work twice a year because of his medication. And it takes a village because he is extremely, paranoid about having to give blood, et cetera. And people need to hold down his legs, his arms. I mean, it takes a village. So when it was time for him to have his blood work after he had been in the home for about 5 months, the house manager said, "Oh, well, we can take him." And I said, "Oh, no, but you don't understand. It takes a village, and my husband and I will go, and blah, blah, blah." She says, "No, we've got it covered." And I said, "Well, no." And then she said, "Trust us." And so I said, "Well, okay, we'll go and we'll be in our car in the parking lot at where the clinic is. And if you need us, just text us." And she says, "I don't think we're going to need you, but if you want to do that." So we went to the parking lot, we parked our car, and we literally were like slithering in our car seats. And we didn't want Ryan to see us. And we were like on a stakeout watching him for when they arrived. And they arrived, he got out of the car, and then I texted and I said, "Do you need us?" "No, we've got it handled." So she said, "I just want to let you know, we registered him in. It'll be about 10 minutes. And I said, "Okay, well, just remember, if he's having problems, just text us." Well, about 15 minutes later, she said, "It's all done." And I said, "What?" And she says, "It's all done." And he came out, he never saw us. And it was as though God was saying, let go, let them handle what they're going to do, let them do everything. I've got it handled, they have it handled. And I truly feel that was a blessing because my husband and I needed to see that. We needed to see to where somebody else could take care of our son. Somebody else could do the daily rituals, do the daily activities, give out the medication, take him to a doctor's appointment. And that gave me peace of mind. So since then, we have had several moments of letting go. And it's been a year now, a little over a year. And I still have my moments, but I'll tell you, it is freeing to be able to let go, let them do it. And in the end, it's letting go and just completely letting God handle everything.
Thank you. Ellen, let's go to you on this one. We saw a bunch of examples of people talking about things they needed, things they wish people would do. What's something that you and your family have experienced from your community or from family or friends that's been like actually helpful, where you felt supported and loved by those around you?
That's a great question. I think just showing our load, we don't have 8 kids, but we have quite a few. Just showing up to the house, because I still have a hard time asking for help. It's pride or whatever you want to call it, but my best friends or my mother-in-law are just showing up and saying, I'm here and this is what I'm doing. I'm taking the little kids and we're going to go and do this. Or, I mean, that is so hugely helpful. But when Davis hit the crisis place, for us, the group home situation was different. Dr. Hardwick's message really resonated with me with that here. I told myself, okay, Davis has autism, and okay, here, this is autism, but he's never going to be aggressive, and he's never going to ever live in a group home. And that was my greatest fear when he was little. I remember going to some sort of support group and somebody talked about group homes. That's never going to happen. Well, when he really hit his crisis state, when hormones kicked in, and he was just so aggressive that he wouldn't go literally anywhere, school, he wouldn't get in the car for, I mean, we're talking over a year. And the church, I had started a disability ministry at the church. I was the director of it, and I couldn't even attend church with my son, but they would consistently come to the house and bring things that they knew Davis loved, NASCAR, or Davis loved this snack, and just coming and saying, you're not forgotten. We remember you. We know you can't come to us, but we're going to come to you. I mean, that was, and they would bring things to put on his wall because he really wouldn't leave his bed. It was just really a shutdown. I mean, we even had to carry him into the bath and bathe him, and he just mentally just went into this, I can't explain it any better way than crisis. But that was a beautiful demonstration of love and coming and bringing community to us, because we all need community even when we're in that crisis state.
Thank you. Jess, I know you've spent some time trying to calculate the value of the care that parents provide by not, just pushing their child into society to care for them. Can you talk a bit about what you've figured out in terms of the value of what parents provide?
I haven't necessarily calculated the value. I just hear from so many parents about the difficulties in even being able to work and be a caregiver. And this is a story that has just been repeated numerous times from different special needs parents who have either left their job or have just decided that it's too hard to juggle working and also caring for their child. So I know I have numbers, like I've been told that if we were to put Luke in an assisted living facility or a group home, that the funding for something like that would be 180 to 200,000 a year. And to me, I just think that's an astronomical amount of money. And why can't we just put some simple supports in place for the family and the caregivers so that we don't necessarily have to get to that point of crisis? And I think, respite's such a huge thing. And then in terms too of other caregivers telling me they reach this point of crisis and then their child is shipped off to, numerous states away to do inpatient residential treatment. And I know that can't be cheap. Or the solution is often, well, bring your child to ER if you can't manage the behaviors at home. And then they sit in ER for 7 to 14 days, and then they're sent back home. So that's where my mind goes. If we could just provide some simple supports for these families, I think we could bypass all of these astronomical charges later on. I haven't had time to sit down between everything and actually calculate those things, but I just know that society will pay one way or another. They're going to pay with, unemployment or Medicaid or food stamps or these trips to ER or the Prozac, the caregivers are all on, or, where there could be a much better solution, I think, long term.
Yeah, I was curious to hear more about, other than respite care, what have you heard from people about what are those like simple things that either society or churches can just provide that would just make all the world of difference?
I think for myself, it's future. I lose sleep over what happens in the future. And I think what it always comes back to is when you have a child, you understand that you're going to be sacrificing for 18 years, 18, 19. You're always going to be that mother, but you begin to release some of that caregiver role. And when you have a child with profound disabilities, you're never releasing that caregiver role. And not only that, as you're aging, that caregiver role becomes more and more intense. And I think just looking to the future as Lucas is going to turn 18 now in August and going, oh boy, my body aches so badly already at 45 years old. What does this look like at 55 or 60? And there are no options for future options or for future residential options for Lucas. So I think it's the hope factor. I hear that repeatedly from caregivers, just losing sleep over how long do I do this? How long can I do this? What happens if I die? What happens if I have a terminal diagnosis? And then that's often the case, is it has to reach this point of desperation where the parent either has a terminal diagnosis or dies before the child gets placed somewhere. And then the trauma that must place on that child even. I just think we could bypass a lot of that with some more options for the future.
John, I'm going to give you our last question here, since you're the token dad, and you've spoken a little bit about husbands, but what's been the biggest challenge for you as a dad?
So I think what happens, and this is really coming from not just my own experience, but from talking to a lot of dads, both at these types of conferences and those in my own community and everywhere, and including moms as well. What really happens is that there tends to be this kind of an identity crisis, or you have situations where dads kind of lose their identity in terms of, okay, we have this disability. Most often you have a mom who is incredible. In the case of my own ex-wife, my son's mom was awesome when we got the diagnosis, jumping in, finding the therapist, getting the resources, the insurance together, everything. But then what was my role, right? Because normally the role of dads, and most dads will admit this as well, I'm the breadwinner. I'll work extra hard, I'll pay for all these things. Well, the problem though then is, first of all, you have a mom who's overwhelmed with doing all of the stuff in terms of caring for the child. You have a dad who's overwhelmed with doing all of this work or extra work. And the problem then becomes, okay, like in my case, where my ex-wife was great at everything, but even though I worked, I wasn't the breadwinner. So now what was my role? Because I'm not bringing in all of the money. I'm not making it so that she can stay home and just take care of my son. What do I do? What is my purpose? And so I think for men, they really have to find that. And I think when marriage is done well and there's a good balance, and I think that takes communication. I like to refer to my 3 C's. Being a teacher, I come up with all these kooky acronyms, but it's communication, coordination, and compassion, right? You've got to be able to speak to your partner and talk about, okay, what is it that you need? Coming out of COVID, we put a big focus on self-care. We need to look at, what dads are really needing in that role, because dads get burned out too. And dads also need that self-care. The moms do a great job, but in a true partnership, you want to make sure that dads are acknowledged, and also knowing that they have a role. They do need to step up, and they do need to be a caretaker as well. They do need to be giving mom a break, but we also need to make sure that they understand what their purpose is and that they're getting their own time and space. And coordination, in terms of, one thing that we always found was a great tool, is a calendar. Every good family and special needs family, if you're going to do it well, you need a calendar. You need a system to track, not just in terms of when your child has appointments, but when you're getting your self-care in. You know, when are you having the date nights? When does dad get a break to go and, you know, do his, you know, men's group? When does mom get a break to go exercise or whatever it is? You need to have that balance. And then lastly, you just need to have compassion, I think, because especially coming out of COVID and now being divorced, I've had to learn how to really have compassion and grace for my ex-wife who, you know, even though there might be some residual animosity over now, you know, separation and divorce, I realize how hard it is to have our son as a single parent, you know, for the time that you do. So, and if you are married again, you know, what it means then is that you're honoring your partner's gifts, their talents, and what they bring to the table. Make sure that you're communicating your needs, especially the self-care route, and also to know that, you know, men, you have a purpose and a place. It's not defined by your pocketbook. It's defined by how you show up. Obviously, we all want to work and need to work, but if you're not the sole breadwinner, or if you're not bringing in a gazillion dollars a year, that doesn't mean you still don't have value. Don't define it by that. Define it by how you show up in your family and in your marriage, and make sure that you guys communicate as true partners.
Wonderful. Let's thank our panel. Again, Yvonne, John, Jess, and Ellen.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.